Well, hello there, sketchers, artists, people who like to hold pencils. I hope you can see me. I'm so glad to be back for another sketch session. Give me just a couple of seconds to make sure that I see myself on the various monitors so I'm not just talking to myself. Yes, all right, cool, awesome, we're back. So excited that we get to draw horses together tonight. If you're on my newsletter, you read the story. I was obsessed from early childhood on, so I'm so thrilled that we'll get to do this together tonight. Just in case you're a newbie and you've not been here for one of these sessions, welcome. My name is Carolyn Peters. I'm the owner of Kira Studios, where I teach traditional drawing skills so people who like to draw can find their artistic voice with having some really strong drawing skills. And I've been hosting these weekly sketch sessions because I feel like it's really important to have a place to report to, a place that will hold you accountable, a place that sometimes makes you do things that you know are good for you, that like are those, I don't know, things you should be practicing, but then when you're at home, you don't really feel like doing it on your own. So I like thinking of these weekly sketch sessions as your training / playground, where I'm your coach, cheerleader, guide on the side, helping you stay up to date with your sketching ambitions. If you're back for another session, you've been here multiple times, so good to see you back. I wish I could see you, but you know what I mean. And so let me just give you a little bit of the lay of the land, what we have planned for tonight. So newbies, you might not know this yet, we rotate subject matter and we rotate focus. So we go from figure drawing to portrait drawing to animal drawings and then to inanimate objects. So tonight, as you have guessed, is an animal drawing night. And then we always have a very specific focus. So tonight is gesture. Another focus might be like values or structure or form or shapes. So tonight is gesture, and that's kind of the good news, because if you've never drawn horses before, you might think, well, I don't know anything about horses, and how am I supposed to draw horses if I don't know anything about them? So here's what we'll do. I have a bunch of reference for us ready to go. I've timed it, so once I hit the play button, it'll cycle through. At first we'll have a bunch of 1-minute poses, then we'll have some 2-minute poses, and then we'll end it off with 5-minute poses. So I'm going to give you just a few tips before we dive in, so you kind of know what to look for once I hit the play button on the reference. The first thing I want to recommend is whatever animal you draw, and even that includes people too. You're gonna look for, hold on, I need to turn off this light, it's so bright, I'm kind of can't even see anything. Look for the major masses. So in most cases, that will be the rib cage, the pelvis area, and the head. And just try to capture those. And once you have them, then you can concern yourselves with the leg and the tail and the mane and whatnot. So that's my first tip for you tonight. My second tip for you tonight is throw any names out the window. Like when you see that horse, don't think of it in terms of, oh, and these are the nostrils, and this is the mane, and this is the foreleg and the haunches. None of that. Because with these names come these assumptions of what something is supposed to look like. So instead, think in terms of lengths and direction. How long is this? What angle is this? So like that, you're abstracting what you're looking at, and it kind of tricks your brain to see it more clearly. And then the third tip I'll give you up front is don't think in terms of details. So if you've been with me to do some figure gesture drawing, you know this already. A gesture is not about details like eyes, nostrils, individual light and shadow things that are happening. Gestures are about the big picture. So I'll remind you frequently to zoom out, see the horse in its entirety. Don't just scan individual portions. Sound good? I'll have a few more tips that I'll throw at you as we're drawing. And the other thing I will be doing, I have all kinds of fun implements ready to go. So I'm going to challenge myself a little bit tonight. And I'm saying it up front so hold, so I have you guys to hold me accountable. I'm gonna start with like just a Prismacolor pencil, and then I'll go through different markers and ballpoint pen, because as I said, it's not just a gym, it's kind of like a playground. I wanna have fun. I don't wanna take this too seriously, and I invite you to do the same. Okay, so let me switch cameras, let me turn on the light, and then we'll get going here. Okay, I need drawing screen, hit transition. See these little post-it notes? They remind me what I need to do. Okay, so you should be seeing the horse. Let me hit play, and they will always tell you how long the poses are. I always put the title in there. And let's start. So think in terms of rhythms and lines that visually connect. Don't even think about, ooh, this is the body and this is the butt and, you know, all that. Just think in terms of what lines can be a placeholder or a path for the eye to understand that this is a leg. And I don't even think about like what shape is that hoof. Do you say hoof or hoof? I think it's hoof. See, we only got a minute anyways. Time to move on. So begin with that, that torso shape here. I'm going to zoom my camera out just a little bit so I don't have to keep moving the drawing pad as much. With a minute, you don't really have a lot of time to futz around. You just, you know, lay down a mark and be unapologetic about it. And if it sucks, it sucks. And if it's good, it's good. And the thing I always have to remind myself of when I do gestures that are timed quickly is to not get hectic. Like I definitely have this tendency to just like, you know, must draw really fast because time will run out. I'm gonna switch into pencil now. So instead of being hectic, I want to fall into a nice rhythmic way of laying down marks. And I don't know if that makes sense to you, but to me there's a difference between hectic scribbling and rhythmic, confident mark making. So of course, when we do gestures, when we draw in general, we have these evil voices in our head, or maybe it's just one evil voice that tells you, this sucks, you're no good, you don't know how to draw horses and all that stuff. I encourage you not to listen to that. I encourage you to lean into the fact that these are throwaway drawings. Not because you don't care, but because you gotta risk breaking an egg, right? You gotta risk making mistakes, but at least you made them with conviction. And the more you do that, you learn when to pull back just a smidge rather than like holding back all the time and never really finding out what your hand is capable of. So it's like we don't really learn through thinking about things. We really learn through experiencing. Oh, these are really fast. Okay, I'm going to switch into ballpoint pen now. It's going to be interesting. So notice I'm always beginning kind of at the torso. I'm going to press harder so you guys can see it. And then once it's kind of like this bean shape, right? A bean shape that then this kind of curvy neck comes out of. Then the head is kind of this triangular wedge shape. And then I like to seek out the leg that's making contact with the ground. And if there are multiple legs making contact with the ground, I seek out the one or the ones that are holding the weight. And I keep zooming out, like not getting stuck in, just kind of zooming into a individual part. Because just with figure drawing, gestures are about the essence of the pose. And the essence of the pose lies in the big picture. It's not the details, as I said in the beginning. And by the way, if you're here just to enjoy the references, by all means, put me on mute and just enjoy drawing the references. This is your session, make it work for yourself. If you find it distracting that I talk, you have my blessing, turn it off. But if you like it, if you feel like it keeps you on track, then awesome. Like for me, I used to do a lot of yoga, and I really loved that the teacher would just like constantly narrate what I should be looking out for, how I should be holding certain body parts, and what to tune into. And I just kind of see this similarly. That's how I like to teach. I like to talk a lot while you're drawing, because I know pretty well, just from having taught so much and from my own experience, like what the hurdles are, Okay, so look at how on this one we have this upward momentum, like he has all his weight on this one, and then he shoots, like this is the momentum going this way. Oh, so we have 2 minutes, I see, that's why I have a little bit longer here. So when you have extra time, what do you do with that extra time? You can start indicating some landmarks. So landmark would be center lines, like the spine. You can start making your shapes better. You can think about form and put a cross contour line. Okay, so I'm going to switch into a different pen. And when I put this pen down, I guess like when I make a mark on the page with this kind of pen, there's like an inner voice in me that goes, no, it's so dark. You can't, like with markers, you can't hide. You just gotta be all in and be willing that it just, won't work out. And it just might work out too, though. So see this back leg here, that's holding weight, as well as this one. So I think I begin with that one coming down, and then this one is the count, like both of these are holding the weight. And then these are kind of extra. And again, telling myself to slow down, get into a rhythmic way of creating marks, not a hectic way. So another way, landmarks would be also eyes, anywhere where you have bony protrusions. So here we have these slanted shoulders on horses. We have like this cool shoulder blade. It's very long. You can sense that here. You can start to think about, as I said earlier, shapes, but so with the legs, like thinking about, okay, where's the rounded joint and where is the kind of straighter lines? Okay, let's move this over here. So looking at that bean-like core of the body, and how that visually connects into the neck and head. Now I'm looking, is there a leg that's holding the weight? And I think it's this one here. And so I'm paying close attention to where does that line up with, like, let's say the withers. Like if I draw a vertical up, how does it align with the rest of the body to get that lean to happen? So in the intro, I invited you to look for directions and lengths instead of things that have names. And the same is true for like rhythms. Like which rhythm, like this neck rhythm to me plays into this belly rhythm, and that plays into this butt rhythm. And so, especially when you deal with rhythms, that's a great tool to indicate movement. So I know in the description I said we'd be dealing with rhythms and movement. So just because the references that I've chosen are mainly horses in motion. There are some towards the end, I think, where they're not moving quite as actively. Let's do one more like this. So you have here the rib cage, and that kind of visually links up to the croup back here. And then that visually bounces into this neck. And so when I know that I only have a minute or two to draw something, there's a lot I let go of, you know? Like if I don't have perfect proportions, so be it. If I don't have details, that's just fine with me, you know? But what I am looking for is that when I zoom out, it really looks like the big picture. Like as in the way the weight is being carried. The way certain rhythms, certain curves may dominate this pose. Now, a really good way of doing this is to look relationally. So what does that mean? You compare, okay, which one of the hooves is the hooves? I never know. Which one of these hooves is the lowest one? This one or that one? And how much lower is it than the other ones? And even though I really like drawing horses, whenever I need to relax, that's usually the subject matter I go to. I'll grab a different marker. It's not like what I was trained in. I was trained drawing people. And so it's gonna take me a while to get in the groove. Okay, this is really faint. I don't think you guys can see this one very well. And so whether it's myself or my students, I always try to think of strategies of like how can we do it so we love coming back to our drawing boards, you know? Like it's so easy to just be like all self-critical and kind of beat yourself up over like, well, you know, all these drawings and maybe only got one good one out of the whole bunch. It's like see if you can enjoy the fact that you're just making some marks on paper. Like, don't be so result or outcome centric. Because like if you just kind of pat yourself on the back and say, dude, awesome, you showed up. You picked up your pencil today like you said you would. Like that kind of self-talk is gonna make you want to come back for more. The kind of self-talk that goes like, look at these. Nothing looks like a horse. They all look shitty. They all look whatever. I don't know what's going on in your head. I just know what's going on in my head. So, you know, give yourself a high five for showing up and doing something different. Getting out of your comfort zone, stretching. It's all good stuff. I kind of like how this fine liner is feeling, so I'm going to do another one with it. It's interesting, they're all running to the right. Have you noticed that? So most of these are horses I used to work with. So when I was in art school, during the summers, to make some money, I would work at the barn. And so these are all horses I used to work with. Okay, so looking at the big shapes here, my big shape is here and the head. I'm looking at, does any of the legs make contact? Not quite yet, but this one is about to, so I'm going to start here. And then the shoulder is coming forward. And then when I place the other legs, I like to look at the negative space, you know, like what's that shape in between? The legs like. Again, that's another way of abstracting what you're looking at. Another way of getting away from any assumptions you might have about what a horse's leg is supposed to look like. Okay, I'm going to switch tools again. This is coming at me. So again, I'm beginning with the rib cage and how that links up with the hips. And I'm looking how the rhythm of the neck comes out. Plays a really simple shape. So, you know, it's just like with figure drawing. With a figure, when we draw the head, we don't begin with the nose for a 1 minute gesture. I mean, maybe some people do, but I don't. And I'm sure most of the times you don't either. You know, you just begin with an egg shape for the head. And so with whatever animal you're drawing, you just kind of think about it for a minute. Well, in the simplest version, what do their body parts look like? So, you know, we always think like, oh, I need to have a book and that book tells me then how to draw a horse. And you really don't need a book. You just need to take a moment and kind of dissect the visual qualities. I mean, you need to be aware of what visual qualities to look for, like shapes, you know, simple shapes, and then forms, that would be the next level. So yeah, this is triangular, but like, is it more like a cone or more like a pyramid, you know? And then the next question would be, well, how light or dark is it? And then you can deal with some details. And sure, it's super helpful to read a good book on whatever it is that you're studying, just because, you know, you're kind of filling up that library and you're starting to notice things that you didn't notice on your own. Like that's, I think, what books and classes are awesome for. But it's not like you absolutely need it. Okay, we finally have a horse going the other direction. And so it's hard for me to see the chat. If you're here and you want to say, hey, I'd love that. At the end, I usually take a look at the chat. I would love to know if any of you draw horses much. Like if you're just like me, you know, you're loving critters of any kinds, and horses, you're not new to drawing them, or if this is your first time. And I know that sometimes, you know, you don't want to put your pencil down while you're drawing and type something, so I totally get it. So don't worry if you don't want to interrupt your drawing flow. So okay, let's talk about rhythms here. See how this neck rhythm kind of echoes the spine rhythm, and I'm going to elongate that even more and get that into the tail now. And then I can echo that with that belly rhythm, and I hope I'll have time to get the legs in, but I'm already happy with this. So again, instead of thinking details of the legs and oh, the leg has to look like a leg with these weird joints that horses have, think in terms of just a straight line for every leg segment. And then you can even just put a little dot where the joint is. You know, it can be super simplistic. And then if you have time, you can get into the more characteristic looking outer edges. So something that I live by when I draw is simple to complex. You begin with the most simple version first, and then you make it more complex. So what's the simplest thing you can draw? It's a line. And all you have to decide is if this line is an angle, and if so, is it a straight angle or a curve? And which way is it angling? And how long is it? Like really simple questions. And you all can do that. Okay, so I'm thinking butt is being overlapped by the rib cage, is being overlapped by the chest, is overlapped by the neck. So here I'm thinking in terms of shapes just because the horse is coming at me so much. So at any time you have a foreshortened pose, that's what these are called. I prefer thinking in terms of shapes rather than lines. Looking again at how the hooves compare, like which one is the lowest and by how much. What's the angle to the back ones? So again, relational looking. Adding that center line, super useful. Okay, what pencil do I want to do? Let's do another marker before we get into the fives. I'm thinking of, you know how every horse is running to the right? Thinking like these two are going to be the rebels. They're going to be the one bucking the trend, literally. Okay, so here's that egg. Here's this. This is coming down into bearing the body weight. I'm looking at how much, like how does it really back up to the torso. these diagonals. And look how he's putting a lot of pressure here. Look how that joint pops down. Now let's get that head in so it actually looks like a horse. So that's another thing about gestures, since we're focusing on what makes a gesture, what makes a good gesture. You need to include all body parts. That's what a gesture is. If you intended to draw a gesture, but you only ended up with a couple of body parts, then you ended up with a sketch, and that's at least like how I define it. So if the goal is gesture, if the goal is the big picture of the whole pose, you need to include all body parts. Okay, so again, this is kind of a foreshortened pose. So shoulders, belly, butt, neck, and head. And since this is a 2-minute pose, you can already start putting that center line in, and you can think in terms of, okay, if I now snapped a rubber band around that middle section, that kind of helps you explain the roundness. Again, I'm looking relationally, how do the legs and hooves relate to each other? What are the negative spaces like? I'm not trying to get too caught up in the outer shapes just yet. There's something off here. Let's bring this forward. And so even though I hate it, I also kind of love using markers for gestures. I hate it because you can't hide, you know, like all your mistakes are like right in your face. It's kind of painful, but I kind of love it because it forces me to make a statement and not, you know, doubt myself so much. Okay, so now we have 5 minutes. I'm gonna switch. I'm gonna keep with this one. I kind of like this one. Let's see what I can do with that. So now that I have 5 minutes, I might start a little bit lighter. Again, looking for the big shapes first, linking them up rhythmically. And then finding the balance of the pose. How is this horse moving itself forward? Where's the weight? And so here I'm going to place the head. I'm going to look at that negative space in between that foreleg, the chest, the neck, and then the head. And so the more you study a certain animal, the more you become familiar with their anatomical characteristics. It's just like with people, you know, like in order to create a good finished figure drawing, you'll need to put in some good details. Not everywhere, but in some key places. And that's why we study anatomy, right? Because that's the details of the human body. And if you've been around horses or any other animal that you're trying to draw, if you study them, if you really look at them, like what certain shapes, small shapes, big shapes, kind of define what they look like, then you can already put them in your gestures. Like I like to, as I said earlier, like to go general to specific, especially when I teach. But when I draw for myself, I'll allow myself to pop in some details right away. Okay, so now that I have a bit more time, getting a bit more specific about the shapes. So rather than just having like these rhythmic marks going down the leg, I'm now looking more at the outer edges. So I always say when you do gestures, don't begin with outlines. But once you do have your rhythms, and once you do have a good balance and a sense of movement, then the next step can be better shapes, as in like looking at the silhouette. The next step could also be looking at forms and finding some cross contours or plane changes. So these type of marks here that I'm making here or on the neck, those are cross contour marks where I'm thinking, okay, this is like if I slice through here, this would be like a cylindrical edge, this like an elliptical edge, more or less. Okay, let me switch to a different, let's get a ballpoint pen again. Let's see what happens with that. Again, beginning with that big, dominant form. And then let that visually connect with the head and neck. Kind of paying attention to how that head is being carried, how high up it is. You can look like the chin. The chin, like how does it horizontally connect to the croup? But don't go measuring too much in that first minute or so. The first minute of any gesture should be from your gut. It's like trusting your hand, let it lay down whatever it wants to lay down. Okay, so now that I have, so this is my big picture, right? These are my big rhythms, my big directions and lengths. So now I can start to make these shapes a little bit more informed, like either make the shapes a bit more specific, or I can work on making it look a bit more three-dimensional. So if you're working on shape, look at the negative spaces. You know, what is that shape in between the cheek, the jaw, and chin? What is that shape like? When you're working on shape, I always say this, think in terms of angles, not so much curves. Curves are wonderful to get that movement. That's what we want in the first few minutes. But once we have that movement and you want to transform this more into a shape study, then I recommend you straighten out your line work. If you want to maintain the movement, stick with curvier lines. So it's always a choice. The choice is always yours. So you want to feel in control. Just know that every choice gives you a different result. And sometimes, you know, we have good days and we're really clear-headed and think with a clear mind as we draw, and we say, I want this and I want that, and you just kind of have a flow experience. And other days your brain is foggy and you're just kind of drawing reactively. It happens to me all the time. And you know, again, just don't beat yourself up over it. At least you picked up your pencil. And with a tail, I heard somebody once say that, oh, the tail, how do you draw the tail? It's so difficult. It's really not. It's just a shape. So like think about, okay, what's the rhythm of it first? Like, is it an S curve, a C curve? Where is it broad? And where is it narrow? Where is it taper? You still have a couple minutes to draw, so if you have any questions that have come up, feel free to pop them into the chat. I'm happy to answer any questions about horse drawing, animal drawing. Okay, let me go back to this Prismacolor pencil. I like that. And the big shapes first. And because these are, in my mind, these are training sessions, right? They're like the gym sessions where you start sweating, where you make a mess, but they're focused, right? So the focus part comes in with what you do once we're done drawing. Like, are you gonna just put these drawings immediately away, like hide them somewhere? Or are you gonna take another look? And I highly encourage you to take just another 2 minutes before you put them away and kind of flip through all of your drawings and without judging in terms of, oh, this one is good, this one is bad, look through them and start noticing tendencies. Oh, I elongated the torso in all of these. Or, oh, I'm really heavy-handed and it's really hard to figure out what I'm describing. Okay, hold on. So this is lower, this is higher. Let me bring this up here. So as you're taking those extra 2 minutes at the end of the drawing session, will then give you the insight, sorry, I had a fly into my mouth, give you the insight of what you need to train next. So let's say you look through your drawings, and you notice I elongate all the torso shapes, or I elongate all the legs. Then the next time you draw, you need to build in a moment of pause to check, hey, I remember my tendency from last time, elongated legs. Did I do it today again? And if you did, then now you have the chance to counter it. Okay, so again, practice. I think, so many people just think, well, practice just means doing the thing you want to get better at, like drawing, but practice, actually, it has to be active. It has to be with your mind engaged. So that means noticing. So Chris, I see that you're saying something about, okay, good. So you like the bean shape, that works for you, awesome. And yes, so I do like holding my pencil like this when I start, and I'll tell you exactly the reason why. It's because like this, I have my whole elbow to make an arc out of. If I hold it like this, I only have my wrist or my knuckles. So that gives me a very small arc. And in gesture drawing, I'm interested in, connecting the various parts with each other. And so that's why I begin drawing this way. And with this kind of tool, I can even get the details and holding it underhand like this too. Oops, I guess I'm missing a leg here. Let's get this one in before we get to the next picture. I don't know what it is, like yesterday too, I have all these weird little flies come into my studio. My studio is in this old carriage house, garage type thing, and the door isn't completely sealed. And it didn't used to be like that, but now they're all flying in, seeing what's happening in here. Like, hey, I heard you're drawing horses tonight, let's see it. Okay, next one. So this is, I think, one of the few static poses, and I think it's the second to the last one. We'll find out. Okay. So again, this is a somewhat, it's not crazy foreshortened, but it is coming at me, this pose. So when that is happening, when I have like this 3/4 positioning, I immediately like to put a imaginary rubber band around the barrel-like chest. So in fancy art speak, we call this a cross contour. And that just helps get that sense of, oh, I understand the 3D orientation now. Like from a side view, when the horse is just kind of flush with the picture plane, it's not so important. Like if you have a side view, a silhouette, not a silhouette, a profile, I guess is what I'm looking for. If you have a profile, your shapes are more important. But if you have a 3/4, your forms start to become important. Gosh, you guys, you should see this fly party happening. This is something else. Let's look at, again, draw relationally. The nose in relationship to the belly, which one is lower, which one is higher. You can figure this out easily by closing an eye and by holding up a horizontal. Here's something interesting about horses if you don't know much about horses. They express a lot of their emotional state through their ears. So if their ears are turned back like this is a fairly relaxed turn back, that means just they're resting. But if they put their ears even closer to their neck, that means they're upset, they're angry at you, and they're gonna come chase you down. So if you ever find yourself near horses and you want to pet one, just look at their ears. If their ears are kind of pricking forward and they're kind of attentive looking, then that means you can stick out your hand slowly and they'll sniff you and you can pet them. But if their ears are turned back, I wouldn't get closer. Just give them their space. So in a more static pose like this, so I know that, in the description it said gestures and movement and rhythm. In a more static pose, there's still movement, or let's call it movement, but it's much more subtle. And so the movement would be in how the legs relate to each other, how much of a sway there is in the back. Another thing I'll say about gestures that I like to play with is line of weight. No, weight of line. I said it the wrong way. Weight of line variation. See how I have darker marks here and then softer, lighter marks there? So that kind of builds an aesthetic. So it starts to look like it's not all just one note. Like I imagine, I always do these analogies where I don't know anything about it, but if you're playing an instrument and if you hit all the notes in the same way, the song kind of becomes unbearable to listen to. I think this is our last pose, by the way. And so the same is true for the marks that you make on the paper. So marks on the paper are like notes that you play on an instrument. So again, let's begin from square one. What are the big rhythms? I have this beautiful kind of S curve here, kind of from the neck to the chest to the butt. So here to here to here. So this rhythm connects with this, connects with this. This creates my unity. Instead of drawing, and here's a neck, and here's a chest, and then here's my midsection, and here's the butt. Like all these look like individual segments, whereas this here looks much more like things belong to a unity, a whole, an entirety. So the other thing about kind of slowing down your mark and being less hectic with your mark is you want to kind of look, decide what do you need, and then put it down. I don't know, with care, patience, but yet trust. It's quite a lot, right? It's quite a lot that being asked of us. But I think the trust part is really key. And like, how can you trust in making marks for something you've never drawn? And again, it all comes back to like, because all drawing principles, it doesn't matter what you're drawing, the principles for drawing are the same. How long is it? What angle is it? And how does this angle relate to the surrounding angles? So once you kind of remember that, and you let that kind of, like, yeah, I've been practicing this, like, I've been doing this. This is not the first time I'm making marks on paper, trying to convince people that these things that I'm drawing are real. Like, let that infuse your marks with an assurance. You know, it's so weird, like, drawing on this live stream format and like feeling like, oh, potentially the whole world could be watching. And like, you know, that kind of thought can stress you out really easily. And it's the same with like, with if it's just, you know, you in a room and all of a sudden somebody looks over your shoulder. And so like, how can you then tune back into, like, I've done this before. Who cares if I make an awkward drawing, or, you know what I mean? I hope I'm making sense. So at this point, I kind of stopped myself. I visually pulled back, zoomed out, and I'm often asking myself in those moments, like, oh, what's really calling my name? Like, what part of the pose do I really like? And make sure I get to those parts before the pose runs out. Because with, you know, 5 minutes, there are certain things I won't get to. So again, you want to stay in control of your drawing. So that's why pausing is so important. Did I get the thing that I thought was cool about this? Or did I kind of dilly-dally and do things that were not important? Oh yeah, you get one more pose. I thought this was the last one. I'm going to try a different pencil. Similar but different. So again, neck rhythm bounces into the chest rhythm, bounces into the butt rhythm, leads us down into this leg, holding up some weight. So there's this uphill, like in horse language, we call this kind of a, this is a, like this, I wouldn't call this a gallop, this is more like a canter. It's more collected, if that makes sense. Like we call this kind of a, when the horse kind of bounces up in the front, it's like an uphill way of carrying themselves. So like that's something I want to make sure I get in this pose. It's like what everybody's striving for, like at least in the English way of writing. So we are drawing quite a few poses tonight. Chances are that one of them, of yours, didn't turn out all that bad. And if you're feeling so inclined, I'd love it if you'd share that with me. If you're on Instagram, you can just either post it to a story and tag me in that story at Cura Studios. You can, like, if you don't want to post it publicly, you can just DM it to me. And this is just a way of me cheering you on, you know, giving you a high five, saying good job for showing up. If you want to have feedback, you can put it into the Facebook group. The Facebook group is Cura Time. You just post it in there and say, hey, Carolyn, I want feedback, please. If you just post it, I won't comment. I mean, I will comment, I'll say good job. But unless you specifically ask for feedback, I don't give feedback unless it's solicited. Because we all know how that goes, right? Like you just want to show off your work and then somebody gives you unsolicited advice and you're like, thanks. I really didn't want to hear that. But yeah, it makes me happy knowing that while I'm drawing and having fun, others are having fun as well. And if I can help, even better. And if you have friends who like to draw as well, maybe you went to art school and you have some people from art school who like to sketch, bring them to the next session. Next session we're going to do trees. I just came back from a trip to the mountains, so I have some awesome reference pictures for trees, and I think I'm just going to focus on using markers. I mean, you can draw with whatever you want, but feel free to bring a friend. Okay, I should put a head on this horse, huh? See, I like to begin with just a line. Again, the line gives me the correct angle, the correct positioning, and then if I like that angle, I can flesh it out more. Earlier on, I said something about playing with light darks, like making some lines lighter, some lines darker. The cool thing about that is that's really a way of giving your drawings your signature, because where you're going to press harder, that's like your personal choice, and nobody else is going to make exactly the same choice. So if you're ever wondering, well, what's my style? Like, that's a really quick way of kind of experiencing your way into a style, if that's even a word. Can you experience your way into style? Okay, you guys, we're totally over. I just realized that this was the end of it, so let me switch cameras real quick. If you hung out with me a little bit over time, I'm so glad you made it to the end with me. I hope this was fun. Before we wrap up, this is your last chance to ask questions. So I'll happily answer any questions if you have them, put them in the chat. While I'm waiting for questions to potentially come in, I'm gonna review the I think I have 5 points that I wrote out for you guys to memorize. Not memorize, but if you want to take notes, like, okay, next time I draw animal gestures, this is what I should look out for. So here it goes. The first thing, you guessed it, you want to look for the major masses. Like whether it's a cow, a bear, or a horse, just kind of think, okay, where's the rib cage? Where's the pelvis? Is there anything else? It's like a really big defining mass. Begin with those. See how you can link them together and begin there. Then don't think in terms of names. Don't think, oh, and this is the crocodile's mouth, and this is the kangaroo's tail. Like, just think in terms of abstract art language. What length is it? What angle is it? How wide of a shape is it? Those are the kind of terms you want to use, not names. Because again, with names come assumptions, and we all know where those lead, right? Third, gestures are about big picture, so no details. Don't worry about the nostrils, don't worry about the texture. Just kind of squint, zoom out, big picture. Number 4, don't start with outlines. Just begin with kind of rhythms, that, like when you squint, like what rhythms connect body parts together. Begin there. And if you have extra time and you so choose, then you can work on those outer edges a little bit more and define your shape better. And then the last thing is have fun with it and dare to make a mess of it. That's what gestures are for as well. Therefore as well. You know, it's so easy to get trapped in like, oh, I have to be able to present everything to everybody and show everybody how great of an artist I am. But it's just, you know, so good and so healthy to just lean into your drawing, see what happens if you make a mess of it, find like new techniques like that, and kind of grow to the next stage like that. So I hope this is all useful. Again, next week we'll do trees, and this is going to be a perfect time to play because we'll do just markers. We'll go from Copic markers to Chinese brush markers to all kinds of fun things, and we'll play around with that. So as I said, tag me on Instagram at Kira Studios if you have your artwork to share with me. And if you're not already on my email list, you should get your butt on it because it's really entertaining stuff that you get every week, just one email. It tells you when the next sketch sessions are. It tells you what we'll be focusing on. It gives you kind of some tips on creativity and drawing. And when you sign up, you get a really awesome workbook with 3 questions that will make your drawings better. So you can find the link for that in the video description below. It's kiraoc.com/3 questions. All right, you guys, so good to draw with you. Love that you were here. Want to see your drawings, and I'll see you next time. Take care.